Rob, thank you very much for joining us. If you perhaps just briefly introduce yourself to our listeners, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Rob Newby, I am the CEO and co-founder of Procordr. Before I started Procordr at the beginning of last year, I was the CISO at Smart DCC, who are running the smart meter rollout in the UK and all of the data network that brings all of the smart meter readings over the air back to the central data repository. Prior to that, I was in consultancy for a good 10, 15 years. And before that, started my career in startups and as a sales engineer. So I've kind of come full circle back to my roots now, running a startup. But hopefully this time round, I'm not just doing the sales engineering, and I actually managed to get something out of it myself at the end.
Great, so, yeah. Thank you, Rob. So, Rob, we had a conversation before, and we were talking about, your experiences when you first became a CISO, and you cited quite a few challenges, and that I think are going to be very common to a lot of the people that watch this podcast. Could you just perhaps just explain about what your experiences were and the challenges you had?
Yeah, the first thing that I really noticed. Well, in fact, the first time I noticed issues wasn't when I was working as a CISO. It was when I was working as a consultant, and I was advising CISOs. And I actually went from being an architect to being a consultant advising CISOs. And then I really focused on the CISO advisory as being where I wanted to be putting my efforts and my time, because that's where all the interesting problems were for me as it becomes more strategic. So I think the first kind of manifestation of it was when I was managing my own teams as a consultant, and you notice that you're getting huge amounts of data from these teams, but it's all different. It's all other people's opinions, because particularly in the risk environment, you get people's judgments being made all the time. And then reporting that upwards becomes a challenge, because you're taking multiple people's different opinions and then turning them into effectively what is your opinion, and actually maintaining the story, the thread of what's important through that is very difficult. You lose data each time that you move up a level of seniority through an organization. So by the time you've actually got up to the CISO level, you're dealing with data from all over your security environment, and that's not just risk data. That's incident data, it's vulnerability data, it's threat data. It's coming from in the enterprise environments I've worked in, that's been anywhere from 20 to 200 people, and it is not just data that's coming from tools. So it's not stuff that's just being churned out in reports for you. It is what people are doing on a daily basis. It's what people are thinking. It's how they do their job, and it's very difficult to capture all of that. So a lot of the first few consultancy gigs I did directly for CISOs were going in and doing assessments of environment. So it started off as being risk assessments, but I think that there came a turning point for me probably around the mid 2010s, that area, where risk was having less of an effect on what people were reporting. People still use it. It is a useful measure of how you're doing in a business or how the business is doing. But the problem with risk is that it gets turned back on the CISO. And I still see this today. I posted something earlier and somebody made a comment about how he was being asked to accept risk. And I said, no, that's the wrong way to do it. You don't ask a CISO to accept risk. The CISO is there to report risk, and you tell the business how it should be managed and who owns it and when you're going to come back and check if that's been managed. You don't accept it yourself. And it was in 2015, 16, that kind of area, where I joined an enterprise where they had a risk acceptance process. And it drove me mad. I ripped it up and chucked it out, because you shouldn't have a process where you just accept risk. Everything should be very well managed. But having the ability to report on that across the business is not giving you any real leverage. What that's doing is saying this: you're reflecting the business back to the business by having risk management. And if you can do it in real time, and if you can do it properly, if you can do it uniformly, then you can hold a mirror up to the business. And that's fine, that's good, but it is reactive. What you really need to get ahead of that curve, and this is, I discovered this over a 10, 15-year consulting career. It wasn't just put in my face. What you need is something that shows how well you're performing. And again, that doesn't come with metrics from tools. You don't show someone, look, I've done 50 SOC tickets today.
Sure.
It's overall, this is what my environment looks like. These are all the processes I run. This is how well I think they're doing today. And then I'll show you tomorrow how they're actually doing. Going out and measuring all of that. So by the time I'd kind of got to grips with what I knew you needed to be doing as a CISO, the kind of metrics you need to be coming up with, and even the strategies for implementing all of that, I took a CISO role and felt like I was fully armed, fully prepared to go.
You knew what you needed to do. Yeah.
I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was really confident going into my last CISO role, particularly. And I got into the role, and I was suddenly, I'd had a previous CISO role where I reported into a global CISO. So it's more like what you call a BISO role these days. That didn't exist back then. But
right, yeah.
But you don't realize how much you're protected when there's somebody else who actually understands you. When you're suddenly at the executive table reporting to a CEO who just wants to deliver, you are suddenly being held accountable for security, in totality, and you have to be able, you have to know everything about it to some degree. You have to know how to make things happen, what buttons to press, what the current state is, how fast it's moving, all of that kind of thing. And putting those processes in place is, it's doable. It's a job. It's one of the jobs that you have to do. Reporting on that whilst you're doing it starts to add another element of pressure.
Right.
But then setting your strategy, delivering to that strategy, reporting on it, and then keeping that up to date continuously. It brings to mind the Wallace and Gromit, where he's sitting on the front of the train laying tracks for himself all the time. And
yeah.
I think I've seen that in quite a few presentations from CISOs. Actually, it always feels like that. It's like I don't know, unless I know where I'm gonna be tomorrow, I can't lay tracks to be 3 months down the line, because I might be going in a different direction then.
Yeah.
So, and I realized that I didn't have enough up-to-date data about what was going on. And this was towards, I guess, the end of 2019. Yeah, it would have been around there, where I was, I knew I was going to be coming to the end of my role. I was in a contract role that had just carried on. And it had come to the point where I knew I was going to be leaving. And I joined a WhatsApp group with a lot of other CISOs on it. And I was asking, look, I've been doing this for the last year, and I've had to do it all manually. I've done all of the...
What, spreadsheets and Word documents and works? Yeah,
absolutely. Spreadsheets, PowerPoint, Visio, those were my three main tools.
Right.
Yeah, Word only happens when you've got a board paper to produce. But yeah, so I'd been collecting data manually. So walking around with a spreadsheet, going to everybody in my team, everybody outside of the team that I needed to talk to, all of the senior management in my team and outside, and all of the exec, and working out, the business environment, and then where we sat and how to service the business with security. And it was exhausting. So I was coming towards the end of my time there, and I'd asked around and said, look, I feel like if I'd been able to prepare for this a bit better, that I would have put something in place beforehand. What tools are other people using? And I got a really resounding answer that there is nothing that does it. And it was quite a surprise to me, because then the more I talked about it, the more people were saying, yeah, well, if you find anything, let us know, because we all want that as well.